answering the very narrow legal question which is incumbent on me to answer in a matter of this nature, and that is whether or not the police officer, at the time he discharged his weapon, had a reasonable apprehension of imminent death or great bodily harm. And because, of course, as you all know, the burden of proof is always on the government, and the standard of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We can reverse that question, as the report indicates in great detail, to one of, is there evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that would prove that the officer's fear of death or great bodily harm was unreasonable? And the answer to that is clearly no. This was a situation, and I'll read just briefly from the report. The officer had shouted commands heard by witnesses while he had his gun pointed at the car. The operator drove toward the officer. The physical evidence is consistent with the operator veering right as he approached the officer and his drawn weapon. A natural human reaction is to turn away from the danger posed by the gun. As the operator veered to the right, he exposed his left flank to the officer, who had already committed to fire. The first shot hit the victim in the left side, penetrated his lung and heart, and exited the chest. The second and third shots were fired after the car passed the officer. This entire sequence likely transpired in less than 2 seconds. A police officer, like anyone else, is required to retreat to safety to avoid combat if that would be a reasonable option to avoid imminent danger. But he is not required to if in so doing he further endangers himself by pinning himself against his car or by trying to guess at the real intention of the operator, who has evidenced by all of his actions that he is a threat to the safety of persons, including the officer. Control of a deadly weapon, an automobile, which he had operated in a reckless manner without consideration for the lives and safety of others, including his passenger, his girlfriend, who was pleading with him to stop. It is for those reasons that these very dynamic situations often result in the tragedy that this one resulted in. But there is no reasonable fact finder that could conclude that his fear at the time he discharged his weapon was not a reasonable fear. We found 3 shell casings. We have 3 bullets accounted for. One that struck Mr. Martins was a perforating shot, a through-and-through shot, that ended up being deposited on the seat where the driver of the automobile would sit. The second shot, or a second shot, skipped off the roof of the car, and the damage to the roof of the car, as you can see in the exhibits that I've brought here today, are consistent with that bullet hitting the car's rooftop at such an angle that it skipped off and the actual projectile was never recovered. A third round pierced the back windshield of the automobile, shattered the glass, damaged the upholstered area right below the glass, and then was left deposited on that carpeted upholstered area, and that round was recovered.